Alexander.
Yes.
Board President Hines.
Here.
Vice Mayor Brownstone.
Here.
Mayor Eisen.
Here.
Great. Well, thank you, everybody. My name is Karen Decker. I'm with the City Manager's Office, and I work as a Senior Management Analyst. Welcome to any community members who may be tuning in as well. We've only actually had one 2x2 subcommittee meeting. That was on November 1st. So since then, we have 2 new subcommittee members. We have a handful of staff. And so normally, if we were in person, we would have the luxury of saying hello to each other and introducing one another. So even though it's a virtual experience, with that spirit, I'm just going to call on the first name of people as they appear on my screen. And if you could unmute your line and just say your name and your role, that would be great. So let's start with Jonathan.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jonathan Reisman, Deputy City Clerk, the City of Half Moon Bay.
Thank you. Kimberly?
Hi, I'm Kim Hines. I'm president this year for Cabrillo Unified School District Board of Trustees.
Welcome. Bob?
Bob Nisbet, City Manager for Half Moon Bay.
Robert?
Robert Brownstone, Vice Mayor, Half Moon Bay.
Sean?
McFetridge, Superintendent, Cabrillo Unified School District.
Matthew?
Matthew Chittister, Deputy City Manager, City of Half Moon Bay.
Jessica?
Jessica Blair, Communications Director and City Clerk for the City of Half Moon Bay.
Mary Beth?
Mary Beth Alexander. I'm on the Cabrillo Unified School District. I'm the clerk to the board.
John?
John Dowdy, Public Works Director, City of Half Moon Bay.
Great. Veronica?
Hi, Veronica Bostonak, Sustainability Analyst for the City of Half Moon Bay.
Adam?
Adam Eisen, Mayor of Half Moon Bay. Thank you all for being here today. It's exciting.
And Jennifer?
Hi, everyone. I'm Jennifer Chong. I am the Public Works Program Manager for the City of Half Moon Bay.
Great. And thank you to PCTV, who's always in the background helping us with our broadcasts. Really appreciate the support. So like I was saying earlier, this is our second subcommittee meeting. And just to refresh my own memory, I was going back to minutes from the first meeting, and we had a nice discussion on the purpose and goals. And Bob and I were just greeting each other at the beginning of this meeting and thought it would be worth just taking the time and revisiting that statement since we had covered some great ground in November. And so in that discussion, we had said that there was agreement among district and city representatives that meeting periodically as a subcommittee would maximize the collective impact of both entities, allow for better flow of information between one another and the community, provide a forum for understanding the issues of the other agency, and allow for thoughtful and strategic collaboration. We had agreed to rotate administration and logistics of this meeting just to ensure, very equitable representation in terms of agenda and other items. And some of the key points that we had talked about in our November meeting was recreation, specifically in terms of programming and sharing facilities. We talked about Latino outreach, sustainability practices, traffic and transportation demand management, and talked about some high-level budget overviews and just assisting with an understanding of the better picture across both agencies. So I know that was a really, really quick refresher, but Sean or Bob, would you like to say anything by way of the welcome before we dive into the agenda items?
Sure, I'll go first, and then Sean, if you have anything else to add. Thanks, Karen, for that introduction. It does seem like a long time ago when we had that first meeting on November 1st. There was a lot of excitement, as I recall, and everyone agreed it was a great thing and what took us so long to do it. So we wanted to keep the momentum going, and so we, I think, agreed let's do it every 6 months. That didn't happen exactly because we had a pandemic, but we're not doing too bad. We're only 2 months late given everything that's happened, but I did run into Sean one day about a month ago when we recognized that because of everything that happened, we kind of got off track a little bit, but we agreed more than ever it was probably a good thing to meet, just do it informally so we could kind of check in with each other and see how everyone was doing. Here we are 2 months late, and obviously we have 2 new members that weren't with us when we met the first time. And yeah, that's the plan, and happy to be here. That's all I have.
I just want to echo Bob's statement that I think this is a good thing. I think we were at the Pride kickoff with a lot of us there, and we were talking about how we needed to get it together again for this meeting. I will say that after that meeting, I did provide some documents to Bob and Matthew and Karen about use of facilities and the facilities use agreement, which I was very impressed by then a meeting that I had with Matthew and Karen to talk about that. And of course, in that time frame, I was then negotiating with the Boys and Girls Club to take over sports at Cunha. So we sort of said, okay, let's look at how that plays out, and then we can talk about sort of how we could share space. And then COVID happened, right? So I do think we've made some progress. I think we need to sit down at the table probably again to talk about facilities use agreements, because I think that's, when we're talking about collective impact, a lot of the time we're talking about sharing resources for the good of the community. So I'm still excited about doing that. And I think we just need to involve some other partners now too, as we start to look at opening facilities. And of course, if I pull 10,000 miles up, it just is kind of the question about when we can have the public on our campuses during the school year at all. We're currently starting to open up Half Moon Bay High School to Maverick Swim Club and to Coastside Tennis Association, because we have some very strict agreements with them that we've vetted with County Council. And I would like to look at doing that for Half Moon Bay residents in general. But the issue is going to be for us now going back to school. Okay, when can we even have parents on campus? We may be restricted from even having parents on campus in the fall. So I think COVID did get in the way, and that response got in the way. But otherwise, I just want to say I'm very pleased with the city staff and with Mayor Eisen also, who's reached out to me personally a couple times during this time to talk about, hey, what could we do? So thank you for your work, and we look forward to continued planning.
Great. Thank you, Sean, and thank you, Bob. It sounds like we're going to have the most success tackling any agenda item if we look at it through a COVID lens. So with that said, Matthew, can you kick us off in terms of the city response to COVID so far?
Yes, thank you, Karen. I will, I'm going to share my screen now. Everybody see the PowerPoint? Great.
Yep.
So yeah, as Karen said, we thought this meeting would be best started with a little bit of context of what the city's been dealing with in relation to COVID and where we're headed. And then the school district will do the same, and that will kind of frame all the discussions we have today. So I'm going to share with you a presentation we've made to a couple of different organizations. We kind of are calling it our mini State of the City. We usually do a State of the City once a year, but this year feels like maybe several years in one. So we'll do this update today, and I think in several months we'll be revising it and presenting it again. So as you know, back in March, the city made the decision when the shelter-in-place order went into effect that we needed to comply with that and be very cautious with our staff and with the public. And we went ahead and shut down all of our facilities, sent all of our staff home, and had to really dive in very quickly to rethink how we provide services and how we could best support the community, especially in the early period of the shelter-in-place order when there was a lot of ambiguity about what our future looked like. For our public works staff, this didn't change a lot for them, other than maybe they were a little busier, dealing with helping with signage and other things to enforce the shelter-in-place order. They also continue to maintain our facilities and make sure that emergency facilities were ready for any other type of incident that might happen. And they've been really great at kind of adjusting the way that they work to have the biggest collective impact on the community for the work that they've done. Things like our recreation services, which are typically very social and done in person, had to really shift. And so we've created a virtual recreation program that's all available online. And our recreation staff are working with all the other cities in the county on a reopening plan that we hope to roll out in the next month or so to start getting some of those classes that can be socially distanced and done in a safe manner back into place, programs that can be done outdoors. And that will be, I think, really important for the community to start to have some of those opportunities. Lots of efforts to support the community. We are now hosting a weekly food drive at the Ted Adcock Community Center in partnership with my mind just drew a blank. Who do we get our food from? Second Harvest Food Bank. Yes, I was thinking Samaritan House for some reason. And that's been great. We've served thousands of families over the last couple of months, and at a time when we're really needed. We also have staff supporting All-Us and their distributions at the library on Saturdays in collaboration with Second Harvest and Trader Joe's. So lots of great work going on in the community. The sheriff has been very active in helping with enforcement and education. We've obviously had a lot of visitors to the coast and continue to have significant impacts from them. Communications, another area that we really had to ramp up. Jessica Blair is our communications director. She's with us today, and her team has been working nonstop to make sure we provide the most update communication to the community as possible. And also just trying to keep spirits high and lots of opportunities to share remotely socially. And they've done incredible work, and they've had to pull in some of our other staff because they've had so much work to do in that area. And then, of course, all of our city council meetings have been virtual since March, and we've kind of found this to be an effective way to do things. And of course, at some point, we'll go back to in person, but in an effort to avoid public gatherings, we'll continue to do this virtually as long as we need to. The city, of course, has been significantly impacted by COVID. Our primary revenue sources are property taxes, sales taxes, and transient occupancy taxes, or the hotel guest taxes. And sales tax and TOT, as we call it, have been hit very hard. For this fiscal year, which is ending in 2 days, we had a projected shortfall of about 18%. We'll find out in the next month or so where things finally landed. But in order to balance our budget, we had to cut staff, furlough staff hours, cut a lot of our contract services, postpone or cancel several capital projects, and cancel a lot of our just general operating expenses. For next year, a lot of those impacts are not changing drastically. We have hopes that we'll have some recovery, but we're projecting pretty conservatively for at least 25% revenue shortfalls, and using the same tactics that we used to balance the budget this fiscal year. Our hope is that if there's a recovery, we can shore up our reserves and maintain a balanced budget without depleting too many of our existing reserves. One of the good signs is that as travel starts to reopen, many travelers will be seeking out beach destinations and resorts, small towns, villages, and rural destinations. That's Half Moon Bay. So as the industry is polling their users, people who want to travel, people are going to want to stay closer to home. They're going to want to stay away from big populated areas, and the beach is always popular. Of course, this is always balanced with the concerns our community has and our ability to keep our community safe. But the hope is that our hotel industry and visitor serving industries like our restaurants and our shops will recover, which will not only help the community economy and those that have been put out of work or struggled over the last several months to recover, but also the city budget hopefully will see recovery. One of the most important things we recognize as we've watched what the state and federal governments and the county is doing to help address the impacts of COVID, they've really focused on large businesses to kickstart the economy and individuals. And so the city recognizes we're not likely to get a lot of support from any of the relief bills or any of the federal programs that are out there. So we really recognize that our community and our city need to be really self-reliant in addressing our local needs and recovery, and thinking about the fact that all of this could be compounded at any time by a natural disaster and really being prepared for that. So I think many of you have heard this, but one of the things the city's considering and has been talking about for about a year is potentially increasing the transient occupancy tax rate to generate additional revenues to offset the impacts of tourism here on the coast. And so over the next couple of months, the city council will consider putting that on the ballot for November. And the hope is that the additional revenue that could come from that kind of a tax, if it were to pass, would help us to reinvest in the community, focused initially on recovery, and then, of course, making our community more resilient for the future, so that another thing like this or any other type of natural disaster wouldn't devastate us the way that it has at this time. Prior to COVID, we had done some surveying of the community just to get a feel of their priorities. Every year in the early part of the year, January, February, and March, we do a lot of community outreach to set our program priorities for the upcoming fiscal year. And as part of this year's process, we did some scientific surveys. And many of the things that people were focused on are listed here on the screen. You know, they were about traffic, protecting our natural environment, making sure the city was financially stable, looking at public safety and quality of life and affordable housing for especially our middle class and lower class residents. We knew that following COVID that it'd be important to reevaluate all of that because the world is such a different place just 5 months later. And so we've gone back and we've resurveyed and continually surveyed the community to understand where their priorities are. They've maintained a lot of the same themes, but we definitely see preparing for catastrophic emergencies, climb the ladder, public health and safety, facilities, keeping them healthy and clean is really important. And then continuing to support the quality of life for local residents and having a stable city organization is really important to the community still. And so we have our priorities for the next fiscal year. Many of them carry over from previous years. Affordable housing remains a really high priority in our community. Emergency preparedness is high priority, and I think we have a new lens to look at that through. Making sure that we're managing traffic and transportation on the coast in an effective way, and really being a leader in sustainability, environmental sustainability. Those all remain high priorities for the city. And then a fifth priority has been added this year, which is economic development. And we see that initially as simply doing a recovery within the community, and then looking at ways to shore up the community's economy. And so we're working on a group that'll be an economic recovery task force that will look at how to best implement projects that will help our economy recover, and then looking at ways to drive additional economic opportunities that can diversify our revenues so that the coast side itself is not so dependent only on tourism, and then also diversifying the city's revenues from a tax standpoint to make sure we're not impacted so severely like we have been with this particular crisis. We're still taking information from people on their input, and this URL, hmbcity.com/join the conversation is a place people can go and provide their thoughts and their priorities, and this will help drive our city decision-making for the coming months and coming years. And that's it for our presentation. Obviously happy to take questions on any specific details of it, but that's just a high-level overview of the things we're working on to help us recover from this incredible crisis and help make our community better for the future.
Kim is muted.
Thought I was toggling the button. Sorry about that. Matthew, on the recreation and looking at going back to, where you can safely socially distance, do you have any idea of timeline right now for those activities?
Yeah, it's kind of been shifting. Obviously, people get excited as things start to reopen and there's positive data out there, but then we've seen a little bit of a slide towards new cases of COVID. And so people are, I think, a little bit hesitant to jump right into those social type programs. But I do expect our outdoor programming, things like dog training and sports camps and classes that can be done outdoors within a month or two. And then indoor will slowly roll out with programs that don't involve any physical contact. And it's those close proximity and physical contact activities that I think are still several months away.
That makes sense. And I just wanted to chime in. I want Sean to have a chance to present on the COVID, what we're doing now. But as we each present this is what we have in our bucket, I'd like all of us to think about where there is synergy and that collective awareness of all the different resources on the coast side. And so you already mentioned Second Harvest and Alice and working with Trader Joe's, but at some point, could we have some cross-fertilization so it's not just on a list, but where potentially we get everybody together, maybe as zoomed out as I am, perhaps having representatives from multiple entities so we don't let people fall through the cracks.
And are you specifically referencing like social and health type services?
Yes. Sean had mentioned to me something called the Children and Families Coalition that he'd worked with in the Alameda, but something that is a little broader because I think we, as individuals, have awareness, but not necessarily a platform where we're integrated. And so we don't duplicate someone else's efforts from any one group,
right?
But have it more synergy.
So we actually have a group called the Coastside Collaborative, and it started specifically around health services, but it's really expanded to all the nonprofits on the coast.
Okay.
And the city, right at the beginning of all this, we took leadership in it. YLI, the Youth Leadership Institute, had been leading it for about a year. And before that, the county had been leading it. So I think that would be a great opportunity if there was somebody on your staff or a member of your board that would want to be that liaison. We can include you in those meetings. They're held monthly. Okay. And it's really all the different nonprofits. We have different presentations. We've had presentations recently on the census, on COVID response, homeless outreach. It really is a broad group. And I think the school district, it makes perfect sense. And I'm a little embarrassed to not have thought about that before, but that's why we have these meetings, right?
Yeah. So absolutely.
Who should we reach out to get contact information and include you in all the...
I'll take the action.
Okay, great.
So,
I'll have one of our staff members reach out to you.
Then I'm happy to run point for that.
Awesome. That's great. And I think, again, you'll be a great partner in that, and it gets all the right people in the room as you've described.
Thank you, Matthew.
Just, Matthew, while we're on that topic, I actually had attended one of those meetings that I was invited to specifically, but I do think we have a staff member who goes, but I think it'd be great if a board member, and if Tim Hines wants to do that, I think that's great as our president.
Great. Any other comments or questions for Matthew before we move on to the school district update? Okay, not seeing anything. Okay, so I'm just going to share my screen and tee this up for Sean.
Hopefully I'll be able to figure out how to move these slides around. Yeah, it's not letting me do it, but that's okay.
Can everybody see it?
I can see it. Unfortunately, I can't control the slides, Karen.
Okay, you can just indicate to me and I'll be happy to toggle for you, Sean.
Maybe if you just start at the first one, that'd be great. I'm seeing your screen, so.
Karen, it didn't go to slideshow view from my end. I can't see the slideshow. I just see the like PowerPoint screen.
Yeah, I just see slide 4, so.
Oh no, okay, let's see.
No worries.
And Karen, I have it queued up if you want me to just I can run
sure.
it from my end. Okay, I'll do that.
Okay,
Thank you.
of course.
Probably makes sense for me to go in order. So clearly, this is a timeline. This is the update that we gave to the board. Gosh, is that a month ago? A month and a half ago? And if you go to the next slide, this was a timeline that sort of described the first month and a half or so. March 13th, it was a date that we transitioned to remote learning up and down the state throughout the county. The day before, we had a board meeting, and I just want to mark this. That's when we sort of were able to project a positive budget for a 3-year outlook. And I think that's important as a comparison to what Matthew just went through to talk about the budget impact that COVID has had on us as organizations, as agencies. So on the 16th and 17th, we did provide some planning time for teachers and administrators to say, okay, this is how we're going to do remote learning. And then March 18th was really the transition of the schools to remote learning operations in multiple ways, paper packets and computers. And then we started figuring out, of course, I think this was our big aha, was not everybody was able to get online, and we needed to provide computers. And what did that look like? And that's what once we could provide the computers, then figuring out not everybody is online and has internet. And how could we provide hotspots? And then realizing, hey, hotspots don't work if you don't have cellular phone coverage. I say that all to say that this was all part of the transition process. For us, it is about funding. It is also about the resources that are required for business learning, remote learning with technology. We've been able to make a lot of headway in that regard. We soon will be able to have Wi-Fi, powerful Wi-Fi on buses that we'll be able to deploy to places that don't have Wi-Fi. I reached out to Mid-Penn, and Mid-Penn, bless them, came through with 100 computers, I think, for families at Moonridge, and internet access for all of them, which is quite a contribution to the effort. We did work to provide students with computers if they weren't logging on. We checked up on them with our community liaisons, got them computers, but you're always having gaps, and that's what you're hearing in school districts now, in particular in California, California Department of Education. Everybody's trying to look at private partners, whether it be AT&T or T-Mobile or whoever, to try to help with this. And there were promises of Chromebooks or computers coming our way from the state, and I think that has been awkward and difficult for them. So we were able to make do, but that's something we continue to work on. By March 20th and March 25th, we were talking about May 1st and having to be out until then. And then April 1st was when we were given notice that we could tell people, okay, you're going to be out for the rest of the year. And I think we were just in a hurry up and wait kind of scenario with the governor and with Tony Thurmond as State Superintendent of Public Instruction, and Dr. Scott Morrow and San Mateo County Office of Education. And everybody has been very transparent about, hey, we don't know what we don't know, but be prepared. So April 1st is when we said, okay, we're out for the rest of the year. We did provide staff and families with updates of community district resources. April 6th, we did particularly mail out to students who are socioeconomically challenged and receive free and reduced meals, resources, including the collaborative, including COSIDE Hope, including Second Harvest, including ALAS, including different places where they could go for social emotional needs or for food needs. All during this time, of course, we've been providing food as an essential service. A couple times a week, 3 times a week, a couple times a week in specific places, Moonridge, El Granada, Hatch Elementary, and then I want to say Pillar Ridge, but I always get this wrong. Anyway, and then we also on the 17th gave guidance on essential services, basically remote learning, food services, and technology. And more resources on the 23rd. Next slide would be great. The guidance for our operations during this entire time have relied completely on the San Mateo County Office of Education and the health orders from the County Department of Health and Dr. Scott Morrow. And this is basically done in all the Bay Area school districts have all been on point and all been working together. Bless her, Nancy McGee, our county superintendent. She has been working with all the county superintendents in the Bay Area, and these have been very orchestrated actions. And Dr. Morrow also working with Santa Clara County, with Marin County, with San Francisco County, with Alameda County, with Contra Costa County, and with San Mateo County. So the Bay Area districts have been working in line. We've also relied on the California Department of Education, and we created agreements with our employee organizations about how they would work during this time. I think we've learned a lot since then from the experience about what that will look like, and we will have to negotiate that with our unions. But first, we have to get the recommendation to our board about what opening would look like. July 16th is our next board meeting, and Dr. Leticia Patia and Mr. Jesus Contreras, our Assistant Superintendent, Chief Business Officer, have been leading focus groups, an open school steering committee, and conducting surveys with staff and families. It's quite an operation. And we will basically present on July 16th. And we relied on our school administrators to consult with teachers, to guide operations at school sites regarding remote learning. We provided resources, we provided ways to schedule days or to structure or to provide help with technology. And then their principals worked with teachers. But that clearly has been a process that has been variable and diverse in response to different teachers and how comfortable they are with technology. But thankfully, our students and our families have been very patient during this time. Next slide. Again, I talked about this. Remote learning is an essential service, and we gave guidance and support to teachers, and we also emailed families saying, hey, here are some other resources. Use School Messenger, use email, turn to weekly letters through the end of the school year. And then technology support, we also provided to teachers and families. There were remote learning guides. There were hands-on kind of like direct instruction for staff and for families if they needed help. There were surveys, phone calls, emails to determine technology needs and keep working at providing that. And then food provided by the food service department. First at 2 sites, expanded to 4 sites, and then maintenance and cleaning of school sites with custodians and maintenance staff, and we could get them on, and that's been it's racked up and sort of deep cleaning, when it became more safe for people to come back to work. Next slide. Grading considerations. This may not be of such import to all of you, but many districts had to figure out how to change their grading considerations, and we really relied on a teacher and administrator-driven process so that our elementary schools all did one thing, but our secondary schools, Cunha Intermediate, Half Moon Bay High School, Pilarcitos High School, they all chose different things. And it might have been credit, no credit, or in the case of Half Moon Bay High School, they decided to keep grades, and we're okay with that. And we didn't get a lot of pushback on that. So they also didn't allow anyone to fail. And it was really an equity-based decision, basically to make sure that people could, if they had difficulty with technology, they could figure it out. I think at the high school, that's a little bit different because high school is accustomed to a one-on-one deployment where students have had computers and knew how to work with them. Next. End of year planning, we had to go to virtual ceremonies. There was a lot of talk in the county about drive-through ceremonies, drive-in ceremonies. Most high schools in the county really did not want to participate in that because of the health concerns, the liability, the driving concerns. And now that we're over it and can look back on retrospect, I heard a lot of compliments to Half Moon Bay High and Pilarcitos and Cunha Intermediate and all our schools that did 5th grade promotion ceremonies, or our preschool that did a promotion ceremony last week. Remote worked out just fine for them. They brought students in, they brought families in. We're able to create a virtual ceremony that they could record. And again, I think this is sort of part and parcel of our next step, which is, return to school committee. What will it look like to get kids back on campus in the fall? We have to have hybrid scenarios. We know that some families will not want their students on campus. And we will have to provide remote learning to them full stop, like we did in the spring, but better. And for those students and families who want to come back, we'll probably have to have hybrid, because we'll have to be able to do what they call stable cohorts. And currently the guidance is 6 feet distance for physical distancing, everybody in masks, temperature checks. And there's a lot of dissensus right now in the medical profession about what is actually required and whether or not temperature checks help, whether or not 6 feet is the right number for physical distancing. I'm going to sneeze, so go ahead and click the next slide. All right, summer school considerations. We had to suspend our big lift summer school, again, because as other districts did in the county, some participated but went all remote. Some, we did some surveys with students, particularly with students for English language learners and their families about this. So this is one of those things where we've done a different kind of hybrid and provided some kind of resources to people. I know we've worked with Boys and Girls Club to see what services they could provide during the summer. But we have worked to provide English language learners and students with individual education plans, resources and services to support their learning ongoing through summer school. Next. Again, I kind of spoke to this. We're all guided by the parameters of the San Mateo County Office of Education, county health officials. I think I was saying before the meeting when we were chatting was that the American Association of Pediatrics has come out with something like the 25th of June, which suggests, you could have distancing smaller because kids get this in a different way than adults do. All that will have to funnel through and filter down, if you will, to the California Department of Public Health. And like other school districts in the county, we will be guided by what the County Department of Public Health says is a guideline, and then the County Department of Health will give that to us. So it'll be the State Department of Public Health and the County Department of Public Health. All districts have formed return to school committees to guide decisions about what safety considerations must guide operations. We talked about that. We have decided to have like an extensive process with our return to school committee and with these focus groups and survey efforts, partly because we saw other districts in the county who went out and said, hey, this is how it's going to be. And such pushback a couple of weeks ago for some of these districts that they had to go back to the drawing board. So I think there's an aspect of this where, like with the grading considerations, the longer we wait, the more information we take from our colleagues across the county, the different ways we can figure this out. Plus, I think you're going to have a moving target. For us to get kids back on campus and to make the decisions about whether or not or how much remote learning they're going to receive, that target will move based on professional guidelines and considerations. But we have informed everybody that we expect modified student schedules and ongoing use of remote learning will be necessary. And next slide. We have a state budget deficit. I bring this up again because Matthew was talking about it and the impact it has on Half Moon Bay as a city. It certainly has an effect on us as a district. I said that the day before we went to remote learning, we had a budget board meeting and we had a budget second interim report at that time that said we would have a positive certification. It was sort of a really wonderful, 10 minutes because we were able to say, hey, we looked like we were going to have to, be at the brink of insolvency, and we made $1.6 million or $2.6 million in cuts. And then now what's happening is we're positive certification. Well, we went negative to positive and back to negative again. Part of this has to do with There will be fewer funds from the state, fewer funds from the feds. And of course, we are in the process of being rather locally funded versus state funded district when our property taxes exceed state funding. But the prediction we have now from the County Office of Education is that you can expect property tax growth to not be as much as it was in years past. And they've gone with a 2008 recession number, and that number of 4% growth has dropped to 2%. And then that meant a big hit for us. And then the governor, of course, put out a budget revision in May, the May revise. That's how our funding is dealt with. Then the legislature gets their hands on it. And then after that, they sort of, make compromises. And so just last week, the week before, we got a new budget. And what's great about that is it looks like it's going to be the same budget as last year with no COLA, no cost of living adjustments. The bad thing about that is it's less money. And so there are a lot of people saying, hey, we need to compensate employees more. It strikes me that, as Half Moon Bay is starting to do furloughs or lay people off or whatever ways you are trying to deal with a constrained budget, we've been trying to do those things, and we will continue to need to make to look at how this will impact us. At our last budget meeting at the board, we said that our 3-year outlook would be as much as $3 million in the red in the third year out year. With a new budget, and we're currently analyzing that, we know that that is going to be far less than that. But our current analysis shows that in the third out year, we still will be in the red. So we will have to convene a financial advisory committee again in the fall, look at the district budget, review more cuts to address shortfalls that we think we can expect to see with reduced funding ahead based on the assumptions that are provided by the state and by the county. And we will also task our curriculum advisory committee with how we can review online learning platforms and instructional planning so we can do remote learning and better than we have in the past. And the next slide, please. That's it. Since that time, I will, like I mentioned MidPen and them coming through with computers. I would also like to say that I was happy that the county approached us, and I know the city has been getting the word out about putting a mobile COVID testing van on Cunha Intermediate Campus, which we thought was a very central place for people to do this. And so we continue to look forward to work with the city and with the county in order to break down the silo thinking that sometimes I think big agencies get into. Any way that we can work on food delivery or on access for technology or sharing services. I have to say the Half Moon Bay Library has been phenomenal in this regard and has provided us some technology that has really been of assistance to our families and students also. And the city, you guys are great partners. So thank you for working together with us, and I look forward to increasing efforts to align our efforts.
Great, thank you so much, Sean. Any comments or questions for Sean? Okay. Great. So next on the agenda, we have the joint use agreement, which Sean had touched on his opening remarks. As mentioned, Sean, Matthew, and I did have a chance to sit down and chat about facilities, about programming, and what the future could look like. And then those efforts were paused because of COVID. So here we can have a discussion about continuing that pause as we start to reopen and reassess at a future date. We could pick up where we left off. Just want to open the floor to any points on the joint use agreement then or now.
I can just, go ahead, Sean.
Yeah, I just think from the school district's perspective, I did have a chance to sit down with Matthew and Karen and very much appreciated them actually, using the model. We have these national model best practice models for joint use agreements. And the work that you've done on that was outstanding, I thought. And I think we are now prepared probably to sit down with the Boys and Girls Club because we have an agreement with them because they took over. That was part of our budget cut process. We save $100,000 in after-school sports by getting the Boys and Girls Club to do it. And part of that meant we were giving them the opportunity to use those facilities. And to get into sort of like a revenue share with us so that they could, offset the cost of picking that up. So I think it would be great for us to talk about that, particularly with Cunha Intermediate facilities. And then, like I said, and Matthew and I had talked a little bit about the Half Moon Bay High School pool. And I think Michelle Dragony had brought this up on her blog. The idea that we could do better and that the community needs to use school facilities. So I'm interested in doing that. And I have talked with Heather Prince of Maverick Swim Club also about sitting down and making sure that we can figure out a way that the city could figure out how they could use our spaces for recreation too. And for us, it's just about figuring out those details and what it means to us.
And I'll concur that I felt like we were making great progress, and I think the hope had been that we'd have the agreements ready for this meeting. But things change, and I think we'll be ready to hit the ground running as we get a better sense of when the school facilities will be open to the public again. And we'll be excited to have additional places for us to offer recreation to the community. And also we hope that our facilities might be an asset to the school district for some of its programs as well. So thanks.
I just add, this is about having it ready for this meeting. I think that may have been because of the last meeting. I was over optimistic and over promised, and Karen and Matthew and the rest of the staff of the city did their part. And then COVID happened, and then we had to make this other facilities use agreement with the Boys and Girls Club. So no, I look forward to us looking at again and sort of involving the different players that also use our facilities so we can carve out time for city use.
And so Matthew, and so once the details are ironed out, back to where we were kind of pre-COVID, the document obviously then would go before each body, would go before the school board for them to approve it, would go before the city council for our council to approve it. Once the details are 100% ironed out, is the intention then to take it to both bodies, or because of the pause on actually using the agreement and the ability to actually use it for a while, would we kind of wait? I mean, what's the idea in terms of getting it executed by both parties?
I think once we have an understanding of what the future looks like for the school facilities, then we can put together that plan. But I think it will, as soon as we have it ready, we can take it to the respective bodies and get it approved. And, it may be something that doesn't take effect for several months. But, I think we're getting to a point where a meeting to discuss some of those dynamics is probably not too far away.
I agree. It would be about us putting it in front of your council members and our board members. I know that it is something that I've spoken with board members about. And Mary Beth was at the last meeting with Sophia Lane. I know Kim Hines is also interested in us working together. So I think it's just a matter of making it real now.
Great. Any other final thoughts on joint use agreement before we move on?
This is Adam, Mayor of Half Moon Bay. So I thank you guys for working on that. I'm excited for it. We've been talking about it for a while, and I'm just, I realize that we're making progress on it, and I'm thankful, and I'm excited to help make this come to fruition, because this is going to be, I think, is a big benefit to the community.
I want to thank Adam also, because he's advocated for this since the last meeting. And I think it's just important that we work together. So thank you, Mayor.
Great. If there are no other comments, then I'm going to turn it over to Veronica in Public Works for a sustainability practices update.
Thanks, Karen. Hi, everyone. Let me just get my screen. Perfect. So hi, everyone. Again, I am Veronica Vostenak. I am the sustainability analyst for the city, and I'm here today to talk a little bit about our sustainability programs and our goals, and see if there's a shared interest in some of these initiatives and opportunities to collaborate. Oops. So I will be talking about two programs today. I'll be talking about both our Earth Year campaign and efforts to reduce single-use plastics in the city. So first, I'll talk about our Earth Year campaign for 2020. We did some climate action outreach late last year and found that the community was looking for some more information on how they could implement sustainability practices in their everyday life. And as a response to that, we launched our Earth Year campaign. And of course, due to COVID, everything is digital. So each month between April and December this year, we will be focusing on a different sustainability related topic. And on our website, we have some information about each topic, as well as links, activities, and other resources for community members to learn more. And thanks to Republic Services, we've also been able to implement a challenge element to this, where to get people engaged in a different way, and we're able to provide prizes for various challenges based on the themes for the year. So for example, right now we have a food waste recipe contest that we're calling All Taste No Waste. And any promotion or any sort of things that the school district can do to help us promote and get people to aware of some of these challenges. The winners, eligible winners, are either students that are enrolled in Half Moon Bay schools or Half Moon Bay residents. So we see some other collaboration opportunities here in both the content and the challenges. To give you some idea, here are some of the themes that we've already done and ones that we have planned. We know that parents and families are looking for educational content to share with their kids, and we'd love to collaborate with the district on either content, activity, or challenges surrounding these themes. You can see we have some for ocean health, air quality, zero waste, food waste. And these themes for the future are not necessarily set in stone. So if there are other topics that the school district is interested in or have planned later in the year, we're happy to collaborate. We think we might be a little bit more effective if we can kind of bring our efforts together here. So then switching gears a little bit, I wanted to talk a little bit about our policies that are currently in the works in regards to reducing single-use plastics in the city. As a first step, we're looking to adopt the San Mateo County Model Disposable Foodware Ordinance. So if you're not familiar with that, the main goals for this ordinance are to replace disposable plastics with compostables, to encourage the use of reusables, and to reduce the distribution of accessories. So that will be forks or straws or condiment packets. We are looking to adopt this sometime in the fall, and it will impact food facilities within Half Moon Bay. Public schools are not impacted by this, but we're curious if the school district has shared goals here, if they're interested in adopting similar policies. We're also curious to know if you currently use disposables or reusables in some of your lunch service or other areas where you might be distributing these items. So I'm happy to go over in more detail some of the requirements or what we're thinking here with whoever's most appropriate within the school district.
Chomping at the bit here, trying to respond every time you say could CUSD work with you, Veronica. Yeah. We'd love to. This is a big issue for us. Just last week, I was sending to our food services director a promoter that gave me, someone who sent a promotion about compostable utensils. And in my last district, our kids wound up, petitioning city council to make it straws on demand. I think this is exactly how you're going to make cultural change in the community, is by combining our efforts. Any way that we could work on lesson planning or promotion to our families. We can use school messenger. We can get this kind of information out. We've done that for census. We've done that for COVID testing. We've done that for transportation planning at the county. Any way that we could do any of that, we're your partners in this. And yes, we would love to, I would love to be able to tell our food services people, hey, we just have to go to compostable. This is an issue that is near and dear to my heart. I think that in general, up and down the coast side, it's very confusing to a lot of people about recycling, composting, and garbage. I think that's something that culturally we can help you with as far as educating kids, because I think at the end of the day, the kids get this more than the adults do. So yes, let's talk. Feel free to reach out to me.
If I could also chime in, it was last year that we had a group of students from El Granada Elementary. They're probably at Cunha now, but they came to a board meeting and presented a request to actually have compost, because we've got trash and recycle, but for real time, there wasn't a compost plan or procedure in place. And so I know that this is near and dear to Freya McCamit's heart in terms of environmental issues. And I don't know if you've spoken with Freya, but in addition to our district contacts, the board member that is kind of leading the charge to participate with the district is Freya McCamit.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, and Freya was going to start a committee on that, Sean. Do you know if that's moving forward, or if, I guess maybe Freya's the one to talk to figure out?
I think it was something that she was going to start actually on Earth Day, April 20, and had that set up. And of course, that was a month after we'd gone to remote learning. And I think the Half Moon Bay Library is still closed at the time. So this is work that we are interested in doing. And I think, Veronica, if you want to involve Freya, because she wants to get a committee together. But any way that we can help get the word out, you let us know.
Yeah, that would be great.
Veronica, I don't know what types of, on the monthly projects or the monthly themes, to have like a project-based idea, things that kids could do that would be like a mini research project. That could be something that if you had materials or ideas about that, that would be an excellent resource for our teachers.
And who best to collaborate with that on? Who should I contact?
You should probably contact me, and I would get you involved with our assistant superintendent, Leticia Patia. So if it's instructional, we would go through instructional services. If it's nutrition and food services, we'd go through that director in our business services department. In the same regard, I mean, you may have followed in the news, we purchased finally our solar panels at Cunha and at Half Moon Bay High School. And we are currently working on another solar plan for more net zero efforts in our other schools. And we are currently, the board just passed another contract recently where we're replacing our lights with LED lighting, looking for water conservation, looking for electrical conservation. So through HVAC efficiencies. So this is all, if you reach out to me, I'd be happy to connect you with the people who we're working with. One of the things we're looking at right now is whether or not we can eventually electrify our fleet. Our transportation is going down in the district because of budget costs, but we will continue to maintain a fleet for students for special education. So this is all things we're looking at: increased solar, increased generation, increased storage, and maybe EV charging if we can follow suit. Half Moon Bay has done such a great job on that.
Great. Yeah, that sounds really great. I will reach out to you about all of that very shortly.
I would say too that if you want to get this sort of done in a way that is kid friendly or family friendly, Andra Yagoyan, ANDRA Yagoyan, YEJHOIAN from the San Mateo County Office of Education. She is sort of their director of their environmental sustainability initiatives. And so if you go on her website or on the County Office Education website, that's somebody that we work closely with on these kind of things too.
Great. Perfect. Thank you so much. A lot of really great information there. Perfect. And it sounds like you have a lot of things that are right along the lines of what the city's looking to do as well. And I have one last slide about something that I don't think was mentioned at all. And the Disposable Foodware Ordinance is really a first step in reducing single-use plastics overall. And so kind of our next step in this, we're looking at implementing some plastic bottle bans, specifically smaller than 2 liters. And I'm talking about both water bottles and other beverages, so juices, sodas, etc. So for the city, we're currently drafting policies to ban these items in city-owned buildings, rentals for city facilities, and also on city beaches and parks, similar to how glass is banned in those areas. And I was just curious if the school district, if you're looking to go that direction as well, if you sell plastic bottles, I don't know if you have vending machines or anything, water refill stations, but this is kind of the next step beyond disposable foodware where we're headed.
So I'm glad you're bringing this up and thinking this way. Cunha Intermediate piloted, I think this year, or we're in the process of piloting this year, reusable metal bottles. And because, quite frankly, the principal and staff and families and kids got tired of all these plastic bottles, being used and terrible. We are currently in the process of putting water filling stations on every campus for, safer health. I mean, our schools tested out as being fine for lead in water, and there were 2 spots where there were concerning reports, and there were filters put on those spots, very underused spots. But we are actually looking at having water filters to encourage, culturally inspire kids to bring their own water bottles. And we were selling metal water bottles at Cunha, where the first one was filled with water and cost about the same amount of money as a plastic bottle. And then you could keep the metal bottle. So this is something that we're working on currently. And again, it's funny. I mean, often school districts will say, oh, that doesn't apply to us. We wish that all this stuff applied to us, because nothing better than a law or a city ordinance telling us what we need to do. But we're on page with that. We want to also get.
Hey, Sean, John Dowdy here. I wanted to jump in a little bit on that. I think what pushing that a little further along, I guess, is that it's been a little while since I've been on campus. Do you have at the high school still vending machines that are dispensing plastic bottles, sodas, water, whatever?
I'm sure. And a big part of that often in schools is, of course, it's a revenue source.
I understand.
Yeah, but I mean,
most of those what I'm familiar with is most of those can be switched over or can accommodate cans, bottles, not just plastic bottles. So I mean, we can't dictate what you do, but what we're kind of suggesting is a first step. We're looking at our beaches and parks, particularly right now, obviously our events to restrict and not allow the smaller bottles and individual bottles, and the school district events, concession stands at football games, basketball games, the vending machines. You guys, as you said, if you want to get to the parents, you go through the kids.
That's right.
And if you want to change, you change kids early on, change behavior, and they hold those behaviors throughout their entire life. So we get that. And again, no pressure. It's just simply to say, when we talk about this, we're hoping head first into this in terms of looking at your vending, looking at how you're selling, what you're selling, and dealing with that. And we know that we didn't have this issue this year because we didn't have this issue because of COVID. But I know it's tough with Little League. They've got their concession stand. They like to sell the Powerades all in plastic bottles. So we're going to have a conversation with and try to change the way Little League behaves and how they do their concession stand. So this is not going to be an easy deal, as well as perhaps number 50, a pumpkin festival next year of looking at going plastic free. So these are all kind of things that we've got to start to really have a conversation about. And I know our council is extremely interested and excited about it. And And I know the district as well is very environmentally conscious. So thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you, John. I mean, when you say no pressure, I think apply pressure. Send me a letter. Veronica, John, whoever, send me a letter. I will make sure that staff understand this is the direction that the Half Moon Bay is going. And we would probably find a way to comply and to mirror your efforts. And I'm all for that because you do have a beautiful resource, natural resource, and we're doing terrible things to it. So I'm just delighted that you're taking these steps. And usually it's a school district sort of like having kids shame the city to do it. I'd rather it be the other way around. You saying, hey, you know, we're doing it. What about you? Because you're right. We just have to call a vendor and say, we don't want plastic bottles, give us cans. Cans are a little better. So yeah, let's talk. Send me a letter about sort of where the city's going, and I will give it to my staff, and we will mirror your efforts.
And if I could ask one question then, John, if to put a plastic bottle ban in place, are there refill stations available in the public areas? So that's one of the things with Cunha. We're being very intentional in making sure there are enough water refill stations for the students to use these metal bottles. So that's, I mean, it's just thinking about the constraints for the implementation.
Yeah, we certainly have to look at that. Obviously, Mac Dutra has a water fill station. Our Ted Adcock has a refill station. We know you have them around. Virtually every one of the commercial folks will allow you to fill up your water bottle at their place. So I think, personally, I think that's an excuse for not doing those things sometimes by folks who say, well, gee, I can't, there isn't a place for me every 10 feet to fill up my water bottle. And I don't think there's a place every 10 feet to buy a bottle of water either. So we'll have to balance that. We've looked at and we'll certainly look at whether we can look at additional refill, bottle refill and fountains on Main Street. They're not, as you know, not inexpensive. The standalones, you have to tie into the water. You know, but that's certainly a possibility that we can look at and kind of go to. But I also think, you know, it's kind of a simple issue. I fill up my bottle before I leave my house, and I can sip on that for most of the morning or whatever, and kind of go. A lot of this, you know. But if you notice the slide before that, when we're talking about probably the 2 liter to 1 gallon size, we realize that people are going to go to Poplar Beach in particular because we control that. And we can only do this if we start doing this on Poplar Beach. We cannot control what the state does and everything like that. So just be clear, we're only talking about things that we control. And we realize that families are going to need to take water down to the beach. We're not going to put refill stations, you know, on the beach. So the fact is that they may carry a gallon of water down and fill cups for their kids or their bottles or whatever is just an acknowledged. We know that. We're not going to get out of that entirely, but you know, those are the trade-offs. And again, we're not sure where this is going to go.
Yeah, let me jump in there. It's Adam Eisen there. Sorry, I got another call coming.
While we're waiting, just kudos to the city for this work. I just think it's phenomenal. I think it's great. And back to that thing, for us, this really became sort of an aha moment because we heard concerns. Well, is the water safe to drink? Okay, well, let's provide filtered bottle filling stations. And then once we did that, we said, oh, great, we're going to get done with this plastic, this insane dependency on plastic. But there's more work we can do with soda for sure. And in general, I think soda should be limited on campuses anyway, but that's another topic altogether. So thanks to the city for thinking this way. I think it's great.
Yeah, we know a winner when we see one. So we'll commit to always have something on our 2x2 agendas under the heading of sustainability, because it looks like one that everyone's interested in.
I'm not sure. I know Republic Services is on the line and they were interested in making a comment. I don't know if now is a good time or we want to wait.
Mr. Mayor, are you back? Why don't we go to Republic then, and while we're waiting for Adam?
Yeah. So Monica or Janine, can you unmute yourselves?
Okay, I apologize. I was responding to something. What was the question? This is Monica.
Oh, I don't know if you wanted to make a statement just generally during the public comment, but I felt like it might be related.
Sorry. Yeah. No, thank you so much, both to the city and the school district for all their efforts, and appreciate being invited to sit in on the meeting. We're excited about the opportunities. There's a lot of ways we're looking at partnering with the schools that we service within the city of Half Moon Bay. Unfortunately, we don't serve all of the ones within the district, but where we can help develop programs or outreach or other materials in collaboration with the city and those particular schools, and that's definitely something that would be available to the other schools that we don't service. And it's going to be interesting with COVID, and so as the schools figure out how they're going to be handling, whether it's a hybrid of being home part-time for distance learning and in the classrooms part of the time, or if it's all online, and what happens with the food. There's things that we are here as a resource to help you figure the service needs in any of those scenarios, and just please reach out to us. The city has all our contact information. We're happy to work with you any way that we can.
Thank you, Monica. I know in my last district where I worked in Alameda, we had stopwaste.org, which was a partnership between the county and businesses and residents, and anything we could do to, I know that you say you're not probably working in Montera or in El Granada, but anything we could do at Hatch Elementary, at Pilarcitos, at Half Moon Bay High School, at Cunha, that would be the logical start for us.
Absolutely. And we're so excited to see the school district being on board with moving, and doing all the sustainability outreach and wanting the pressure. So we're happy to provide that pressure.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you, Republic Services. Thank you, Veronica. I believe we had one more comment from Adam, and then just a quick time check. We still have traffic and transportation demand management, a social justice, climate and action item, public forum, and then just future agenda setting. So with that, Adam, are you available?
I am. I'm back. Thanks. So I'm glad we got the sustainability talk together. When I first was talking to Veronica about this, I really loved what she had done with the monthly piece that she was putting up on the web. And as my children and I were looking at it, I thought it was a great opportunity to partner with the schools and a collaboration of those topics where, the school district and the city are working together to even, again, come up with those topics and work in sync together, I think would be tremendously powerful. So that's kind of where the origination, I think, of the collaboration came from. Obviously, it sounds like there's so much more we can do together, which I'm excited for. And then just in terms of the plastic ban, Kimberly, you're absolutely right. We talked about water refill stations when we were talking about this. We are also, just so you are all aware, it is a big issue to ban actual plastic bottles, in terms of dealing with the plastics industry on its own. So I'm not so sure, although we are moving forward with it with all force, how feasible it's all really going to be by the end of the day. So just to temper expectations on that one. because we have to be very careful about our legal fees. That's it.
Great, thank you. Any other final comments before I move us along to traffic and TDM? Okay, Moz, take it away.
Thank you, Karen. Good afternoon, all. Sorry I joined you guys a little late and I missed some of the earlier conversations. My name is Moz Willigini. I'm the city engineer, and I'm very happy to be here today to give you guys a little update on traffic and transportation for the city of Half Moon Bay and potential collaboration opportunities with the school district. So overview, I'm going to touch on a few things, and I know time is a little short, so I'll keep things moving. I want to give a little update on a pilot project that we're working on, Our Voice. A quick update on the Kelly Avenue Highway 1 capital improvement project, and then we'll talk a little bit about parking and traffic management partnership opportunities that we see over here on the coast side. So the Our Voice pilot program, the Public Works Department and Jennifer Chong specifically has been working with a group of local residents on this program. The goal overall is to engage the community and to understand challenges for individuals trying to use alternative modes of transportation. So this program is actually a partnership with Stanford University. It's part of their health science initiative. However, the way that the program was pitched to us was that it could be used for any tool for communication of stakeholders. And so that's what we really utilized the tool for. So each of the participants, we had about 6 overall participants that are working on this right now. They have an app, a discovery tool app that is put out by Stanford, and each community volunteer uses this app, and they basically go around their neighborhood and they're able to take pictures, make notes, and identify what makes it challenging for them to get to a bus stop, to walk to the store, different things. So it's just another way of getting that unique perspective from the individual as far as what the city could do and what we could do as a whole to try to make that a little bit easier for folks to use, whether it's public transit or ride sharing or just biking or walking. This effort started in May, and as I mentioned, it's actually ongoing right now. We have a little bit of an overlap. Jennifer had to jump off to do a meeting with the participants at 4:30 today. And then there will be an upcoming presentation to the city's mobility subcommittee in the near future. We're working with our city clerk to schedule that, and we can certainly report back any findings to this 2x2 committee as well. So that's kind of the quick update on that program. Are there any questions before I jump to the next item? Thank you. And I'm happy to answer any questions if anything comes up moving forward as well. The next project I just wanted to highlight, this is a larger project and we've worked on it in the past in different capacities. The Kelly Avenue Highway 1 intersection. This project's been on our CIP and our capital improvement program for a while. It's currently an unfunded project, but I think the need for improvements at this intersection are relatively clear as far as the signal is, it's an older signal. The pedestrian amenities and bike and the lack of bike facilities are pretty apparent. We are looking at trying to replace the signal equipment and as well as incorporate new bicycle amenities. You may have seen bike boxes in other project areas. So we're looking at doing additional visibility for these alternative modes of transportation that are using this intersection, this corridor. We're also looking at incorporating additional pedestrian safeties. The refuge medians that are kind of out in the intersection are a little out of date, and so there's some improvements that are needed. We've been working with Carlene Foldenauer. I've been working with her. She's a member of our Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee, as well as working with us on various outreach and efforts that she does with the schools. So in the past, the different parent surveys that have been conducted, specifically at the Hatch Elementary, but also district-wide, have talked about different types of projects and improvements that parents and students want to see. And for the Hatch School, this has been on the top of the list for a number of cycles. So we're looking at getting grant applications into the state, and in the near future, we have an active transportation program, Cycle 5, that is due in September 2020. That we are currently working on the grant application package. And as I mentioned, the district has provided support through different outreach methods with parents and student groups. We will also be seeking letters of support for the specific grant applications as we move forward. So in the near future, I'll work with Carlene and you, Sean, to see if we can get letters of support for those applications as we go, and hopefully can obtain some funding to improve the safety here. What we're also looking at doing is the improvements at the intersection of Kelly and Pilarcitos. We're looking at tying this corridor on Kelly Avenue to this intersection project. So it wouldn't just be the intersection itself. We'll look at improvements to that, to the entrance to the school, to the Hatch Elementary, as well as the school district property, as well as part of that larger project. Are there any questions on this particular piece?
Are you looking at putting a light in down there by Pilarcitos, or will it stay a stop sign, or do you know yet?
It would. We're still looking at doing a stop controlled. We're looking at increasing the location of the crosswalks, doing bulb outs, and doing other improvements to increase visibility, as well as some traffic calming measures, speed tables. Those are the types of things we're looking at, and not really introducing a new signalized intersection at that location.
Okay. I mean, so a light wouldn't help with the, I don't know, sometimes I feel like the traffic gets screwed up because of the stop sign, and then they don't make the light, and then it makes a backup there, or things like that. But it sounds like wouldn't help to improve things.
Yeah, usually when you put the signal close to another signalized intersection, it generally tends to back up more. Now, there's other things that we can certainly do, and this is it's something that we can talk about. There's that entrance to the school district property right there off of Kelly Avenue before you get to Pilarcitos.
Right.
If you can see my pointer. This I've noticed that this actually does cause some backing up, whether it's somebody coming westbound and trying to make a left turn into the parking lot. Sometimes they'll get passage to between folks trying to get onto Highway 1 or Kelly. They'll make that movement. But if they don't get that allowance, then they kind of plug up the rest of it, and that impacts the signal back at Highway 1. So that's part of what we would look at, is potentially looking at maybe either changing the hours of that, or maybe closing or eliminating that, and maybe shifting that access point.
Well, and the other thing that seems to be kind of hard is that crosswalk there at the bottom. Mm-hmm. Like a lot of times people don't get up to the light because there's a lot of kids crossing, or they can't keep going from the light because there's so many people crossing there. So that's why I wondered if maybe having a time where you just cross or you just drive might help that, because that crosswalk seems to impact the traffic there too. But I don't know, just a thought.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. It certainly does. What we can look at different opportunities, whether we do flashing beacons, where similar to what we have in the mid block on Kelly near the Cunha and the Ted Adcock Center. We can look at pieces like that. I don't know if we can. I will look at other opportunities. But generally, unless we do a signalized intersection, it would be tough to do some sort of a metered crossing. Now, there's always the opportunity for volunteers if there's any potential. I know that's kind of, we've gone back and forth on that, the subject of crossing guards, but there's always that potential opportunity as well, to try to limit the times that kids would cross the intersection. But we'll look at that. Right now, we have a very, very preliminary conceptual design for this project. where we would be looking at grant funding to start the design and environmental phase, and we would get into more details as far as the design as the funding would become available. The last piece I wanted to touch on a little bit was parking and traffic management. And it's a little twofold. There's been some conversations in recent city council meetings regarding the coastal access and parking in residential areas, and so I've kind of put that under this summer 2020 demand, and wanted to touch a little bit on that. So obviously, with the shelter-in-place restrictions being loosened a little bit, and then looking at just the good weather and folks trying to get out of the house, we've obviously seen a high demand for coastal access and parking near the beaches and the bluffs. So one thing that we started considering was, are there opportunities to supplement the amount of parking that's available? Poplar Beach parking lot, for example, I saw some images from some of the neighbors out there over the weekend that by midday, the parking lot was pretty much full. So folks are still trying to come in, and they're circling around not finding parking. So they're going back to the parking lots. They're going back to other areas in the residential area, parking spots. But the idea was, if maybe there's a partnership opportunity here where if the district is interested, and maybe the Parent Teachers Alliance is interested, would there be an opportunity for, for example, using the Hatch Elementary parking lot as overflow parking? Would there be an opportunity to utilize the PTO and having that as basically a fundraising, using this as a tool to fundraise for the PTO and the school, and also helping to mitigate some of the parking overflow at the parking lot? So that was kind of one of the questions that we had. We wanted to kind of bring up to see if there's any, and I know there's a lot of other pieces that would go along with that, but is there a demand? Is there an opportunity there to partner on something like that?
Certainly the district, I think, would like to contribute to this. I think the issue that we have is at Hatch, for example. We're doing construction to finish off the construction there, the modernization. So this summer would not have been a time when we could have done that. Going forward, if we wanted to talk about this, it may be part and parcel of the facilities use agreement and get council and board to agree to it. I think that's something that we could explore for the future if this is a concern about parking in the community for beach access. This summer, that could not have worked. And going forward, when we talk about fundraising, et cetera, there's always the issue of liability for the district. So, yeah, we'd want to raise funds, but we want to raise funds for the district. So that's something that, we're trying to get out of the business of giving it away for free. I'm sorry to say that because of our budget constraints. So I'm happy to look at this under the purview of the facilities use agreement and talk about in the future whether or not some of our parking lots could be of use to the city or what have you.
Thank you, Sean. That would be wonderful. I would be happy to engage with, I'll touch base with Karen and Matthew since they've been working on that with you, and see if we can start talking a little bit more about that moving forward. Appreciate that. And the next piece I wanted to touch on a little bit was the fall 2020, and apologies, I wasn't here for the earlier part of the presentation. And I know that there was a lot of discussion about the COVID-19 response, but part of the traffic demand that question that came up when we first looked at the priorities for the city was morning and afternoon traffic, obviously. And when we started the last 2x2 meeting, which seems like a lifetime ago, we were talking a little bit about, what could we do possibly to work together to try to limit the amount of traffic being generated in the mornings specifically, because the afternoon seemed to be a little bit better. But the mornings, there certainly was a lot of peak traffic, especially around schools with, folks trying to get drop off and kids walking and biking. So some of the ideas that we had that we wanted to kind of throw out there was, how can we look at opportunities to increase ride sharing and reduce traffic overall? I understand, one of the thoughts that we had was the schedule of the different schools, and if there's a way of maybe providing some flexibility there. I don't know what the school's going to look at. As a parent in the district, I've been part of. I've been to a couple of the meetings regarding the fall 2020 program, so I've gotten a little bit more information through that. But big picture, trying to understand, is there, we most likely will probably at some point go back towards being a fully operational, with everybody in attendance and not having like a class A and a class B. And as we go towards that, is there a way that we can increase ride sharing and maybe incentivize ride sharing? Some of the ideas that we were kind of throwing around independently was, parking at the high school, for example. I know that we have a lot, there's one entrance ingress point and one egress point, and it does get a lot of congestion with Main Street and Highway 92 traffic. Is there an opportunity that we can maybe reduce the amount of parking available for the high school? Maybe there's a way of incentivizing location of parking spots for folks that are carpooling. Just want to kind of throw out that topic and just kind of start that conversation.
Yeah, I mean, Maz, I think at the beginning of the hour, we talked about the school district certainly has to present a recommendation to the board about how we're going to go back. But most districts have come to the understanding that you're going to start the school year probably with hybrid, remote learning offered, staggered schedules, fewer students on campus. So there's that piece, and that phases over time where you limit people on campus who aren't students, even families, until such a point as then you can have them start coming on. But that's all going to be based on guidance from the Department of Health. I think this notion of ride sharing and traffic reduction is really important. I mean, the walk and roll to school efforts are something that we've worked on with Carlene Foldenauer. She just put in a grant recently about encouraging people, hopefully we'll get the grant of trying to encourage more people to walk or to roll or to carpool or to take public transportation. It's an interesting notion about high school parking and reducing or reconfiguring that because there are two sort of lots for students and staff. If you were to reduce one of those lots, it's a question about would you have the capacity to do it? Because I could tell you that I would love to have that space to put a solar field on, right? Because that would offset our operational costs and maybe make the school net zero if we could have another solar field up there or more carports there, and we're looking into that now. But also back to the other thing is you would reduce emissions if people were incentivized to carpool. These are all cultural changes that people find inconvenient at first and then say, oh, it was no big deal. Why didn't we do that before? But you know how people are with parking.
If I could chime in on the high school parking, and I am an alumni parent, I love the idea of ride sharing and that sustainable practice. In reality, when it comes to sporting events, and you have sporting events and a theatrical event or a music concert, you're at capacity and lots of illegal parking now with all of the parking lots filled. So there has to be some, it's a great idea, but we have to be mindful of those surge needs. And, those times when you want your grandparents to be coming to campus to see the kids' events. And, we don't want to just make it, okay, fine, handicap accessible up on the top of the hill, but be mindful of the whole community in trying to implement such a program.
No, I definitely I hear where you're coming from on the special those special events, and that wasn't the intent wasn't to limit the amount of that. I mean, one option maybe instead of physically reducing the amount of spaces is maybe issuing less permits for some of the students, for example. I mean, just some ideas. I know it's tough because especially for high school students, they have their car and usually they want to use it. And I was a teenager once upon a time, so I understand.
This is Robert. Just one quick comment on ride sharing. I'm on the board of commute.org, and they pointed out that as long as it's uncertain, the number of positive tests and positive infections in the community, people for a while might be very reluctant to ride share. They might be very reluctant to use public transportation. As far as I understand, if I'm not wrong, Sam Trans has decided not to serve schools right now. Is that right? Do I have that right? They're not going to be running buses to schools because they're afraid of the risks.
I'm not sure about that, but
yeah, I heard something like that. So, which of course is a separate issue. How do you get all those students to school? Boy, talk about a perfect storm of issues affecting getting kids to school, not to mention all these events. So you've got the psychological issue of people being very nervous about sharing rides, public transportation. Some public transportation may or may not be disappearing, in which case, how the heck would you get kids to school? So we have some interesting challenges that cities happening to partner wherever we can. Commute.org was saying, well, yeah, we might be able to offer some of our smaller vans and bus services. But then, of course, that runs against people not wanting to use any kind of public transport. So I don't have any answers when I'm saying that those factors could be confounding some of our strategies, at least temporarily, and just have to figure out backup plans.
Now sorry.
If I could, I'd just say, I think that's the key word, Vice Mayor and everybody, temporarily. This is a blip. If you took the traffic and the issues we have for commute today, we'd all live with it, and we wouldn't be talking about any kind of programs. But that's a temporary situation, and as we look at this, we're just putting this out, to start the conversation. We're not anticipating this to be effective this coming fall. It's just not reality. But as we start to talk to administration at the high school about many things, when we went out with YLI and we talked to them about climate action, they understood that these were big, important issues, and primarily their participants were kids at the school. So they, this is as much a part of plastic bottles and recyclable and compostables as it is everything else. So it's all part of it. But it's right now we really can't be making major moves, taking major actions. We just don't have a good situation to work with. But we just wanted to open the conversation with this. Every time, I can say this, every time we've gone to the community and our council has had listening sessions, the high school has been, and school traffic in general, but the high school traffic in specific terms has been probably the top 1 or 2 items on the list of concerns that we have very little control over. And so this is our forum to have that conversation back. And I'm sure this is nothing new to the board members and to the superintendent as well. You have the public visiting your offices and your meetings as well. But that's why, in part, this is here. But it's a start of a conversation. Let's leave it at that, I guess, at this point.
May I jump in? This is Adam Eisen. So this is just pie in the sky, but I like throwing stuff out there while I've got this audience. So I was a person who biked to school every day of my life until I went to college, and then I walked. But so I don't know if we would ever look at an incentivization plan or provide, but like electric bicycles to the high school students. maybe halfway through the city to reduce traffic and halfway through the school district. If we gave out, let's just say 100 and then we reuse them throughout the lifetime, maybe we partnered with Lime or one of those other companies that already does it and doesn't have, the distribution that they did before, and so now needs to redeploy a unit somewhere, whatever it may be. But that's a way to allow kids to get to school on bike without then having to use traffic, and it's fun and it's outside and all the different pieces. I know it's out there, but just throwing it out there.
It's actually something we did in Alameda, Adam. It's not that out there. I mean, in Alameda, they piloted with Lime bikes, and then citizens sort of came unglued with all these Lime bikes being left all over the place. Our kids loved it. The district didn't have to pay anything for it, and I'm not even sure that it cost the city much because, of course, it is a service that helps pay for itself. There is the equity concern about who can afford them and who cannot afford them, but we actually found a wide range of students using them, a wide range of people using them. I think it is a great idea if the city were to explore it. Again, you do have that issue where if kids ride a Lime bike up onto campus and they leave it there, and it's kind of stuck there and you don't have residents able to use those bikes. I think it would be kind of an elegant solution for Half Moon Bay, actually.
Yeah, no, it's definitely got something to it, especially if we were able to track people. Again, maybe they wouldn't need to pay for it if they're a high school member, but they have to scan their ID. So we know where they left the bike, and that way we know what kind of condition it was in and blah, blah. I have no idea how all that stuff works, but I like the concept.
It worked in Alameda. It had a lot of students who didn't use their own bikes and for whatever reason were in a rush or needed a ride or did what they needed to do. We saw the kids using those Lime bikes. It's an interesting idea.
Yeah, so maybe as staff we can explore that at some point. Or I feel like we've got people in the community that are associated with those companies too. So just throwing it out there. I think if we threw it on the agenda or something like that at some point, just to discuss, we would probably get some community input, which would lead us in the right direction of where to follow the next steps on that. Or maybe we even reach out to Alameda and see what they did. Is that possible to do for next meeting?
We can certainly do some research and work with folks. We had actually started the conversation about dockless rentals at Poplar Beach, for example. We had always thought that would be a likely, logical place to start with this. But we talked about that with Bike Pedestrian Advisory Committee, which Colleen is Foldnower is part of. So I think we might take that back sort of through that group as well and start the conversation. But I'll just say there's a lot of you'll get a lot of community feedback, and I'm guessing a lot of it won't be affirming and positive. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't move forward. It doesn't mean we shouldn't evaluate it. And there has to be some way to make something happen. And I know that there are agencies that actually grant monies for use for bikes. And CCAG provides funding for bikes for public agencies. And so this is not that unusual. And certainly we can take a look at that as part of the bigger picture package.
Yeah, and my idea is specifically to deal with the traffic for the high school. But obviously done.
Got it.
Great, thank you. I just want to do a quick time check. I show 4:53. This meeting is scheduled until 5 o'clock. And we still have social justice, climate and action, public forum, and future agenda items. Can I see by just a show of hands, physically or verbally, do we need it to have a hard stop at 5 o'clock? Just looking for some direction on that. Okay, I'm going to take us through the agenda as efficiently as possible with the understanding that if some folks need to leave, understood. So let's move to social justice, climate, and action. Just a quick update from the district and from the city. Do I have a volunteer who would like to go first?
I'll go first, Karen. Yes, I'll cover what we've done as a city around social justice from a communication standpoint, and then Matthew will dig a little deeper into what's ahead. So for the month of June, we saw both Pride Month as well as a continuing and growing movement around the protection of Black lives and systemic racial inequality. For the first time, the city was proud to hang the rainbow flag on City Hall for the month of June. We participated in a car parade and short celebration at the library on June 1st with remarks by Mayor Eisen, the superintendent, as well as other local leaders and coastside clergy. And the Half Moon Bay community is a loving and inclusive one, and this event was a wonderful display of that. On May 25th, George Floyd was killed by police in Minneapolis, and his death sparked protests globally, including here on the coastside. And as part of the mayor's weekly letters, we reminded the community that Half Moon Bay is a welcoming, tolerant, and safe place for all people, no matter their color, religion, national origin, socioeconomic standing, gender, sexual orientation, or immigration status, and that there is zero tolerance in Half Moon Bay for prejudice, racism, bigotry, hatred, bullying, and violence. And that means by community members, businesses, or by those under the color of authority. And throughout the month, as part of these protests, dialogue began around law enforcement and excessive use of force policies. And we've included messaging around racial inequality in law enforcement in the past 4 issues of the mayor's letters, and we'll continue to keep it a topic of conversation. We held a law enforcement study session at our June 16th City Council meeting, and there are a number of follow-up actions that Matthew will now delve into. Matthew?
Thanks, Jessica. So as Jessica mentioned, last week we had a workshop prior to our city council meeting to talk, just to hear from the community, to hear from the sheriff's office who provides law enforcement for the city of Half Moon Bay and the greater coastside, and to talk about how we as a community can move forward and address some of these concerns. We got a lot of public comment, a lot of good ideas, and a good response. We had both the sheriff and our local sheriff's captain, police chief, Saul Lopez, participating. They were able to provide some great perspective and respond, in live to those questions and comments. Where we're headed with this is the council formed a subcommittee to look at our contract with the sheriff's office for police services and to make recommendations on how we might change that in the future and how we can work together with the sheriff's office to improve the relationship between law enforcement and the community and address some of the greater concerns we hear out there in the community. So that subcommittee will meet several times and develop some recommendations for potential inclusion in a future contract or further discussions with the sheriff's office. Additionally, we're going to be presenting one or a series of public meetings on law enforcement here on the coast side, and that'll be looking at some of the recommendations that we've heard already and providing further opportunities to hear from the community and for the community to interact directly with the sheriff and some of the law enforcement officers that we have here on the coast. And the hope is that it can be educational. One thing that I've noted, I've been working with the sheriff's office here at the city and also when I worked for the county for almost 20 years. And it's encouraging that a lot of what we hear out in the public conversation, not just here, but nationwide, about things that should be changed and things that should happen within law enforcement are already being done and have already been implemented by the sheriff's office for quite some time. So I think our baseline is different than some other communities, which is great. It means that we can focus in on areas that are really important to the community, knowing that the sheriff's office already does a lot of the work that people are looking for. And then, of course, and informing the community of that helps them to understand where we can focus on energies. And then, of course, our hope is that through that education and through that feedback and discussion, we can find better ways to engage the community and work with the sheriff's office and provide some of these services that they provide for us. So we're looking forward to that. We hope that will improve some of the concerns in the community and relationships with the sheriff's office and with the city, because the sheriff's office really is part of our team as the law enforcement provider for the city of Half Moon Bay.
I'm happy to speak on behalf of the district on this regard. I think the first time I met with Bob, probably August of last year, we talked in particular about how I was impressed that the city of Half Moon Bay has trabajar, jugar y vivir, to work, to play, to live, and it's in Spanish. And I just want to say, from the standpoint of an outsider coming into Cabrillo Unified School District, one of the first things that we remarked on was, okay, we have 52% of our students who are Latino, Latinx, Hispanic, whatever term one wants to use to describe themselves. And that's a big deal. And so context does matter. I think what Matthew said is important to hear too, which is context matters. I would totally agree that Saul Lopez and the Sheriff's Department have been wonderful partners with us in the district. And Sean Chase and Vake as our school resource officers, we don't pay for them, but they've been really, I think Sean Chase, he's going on to another assignment, but a couple of years ago, I think he was role model of the year, I think on the coast side or something. I mean, these individuals have developed great relationships with kids. That said, we also see that school districts are disinvesting in police services, whether it's Minneapolis, San Francisco, Oakland, the list goes on and on. In our context, we do not pay for those services. We just use those services, and they have been great partners to us. And I got to give a shout out to Saul Lopez and Matt Ken and to the Sheriff's Activities League, et cetera, et cetera. That's one piece of it. I think, this is really a topic of concern because of George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery and Black Lives Matter movement, which is one that we all need to acknowledge, that there are disproportionate outcomes for Black Americans, as there are for Brown Americans. And for us in the district, we really saw this very important point to bring home last October with Hispanic Heritage Month, because it had not been named as a proclamation in the district, as I understand it, previously. And when you're 52% Latino, Latinx, Hispanic, I'm always going to probably err and say Latinx now, but that's really something we need to be looking at. This year, we have revamped our English language and language learner master plan, because not only do we believe that Hispanohablante Spanish speakers need to have on-roads to master English, we also think our English speakers need the opportunity to learn how to speak Spanish, which is why we have an immersion program at Hatch Elementary. We also worked this year very closely, and this started sort of the conversation with Jessica about LGBTQ rights. At the beginning of the year, I had the opportunity to sit down with Jeannie Vargas and Jenny Walter of Coast Pride. And we've created an LGBTQ roundtable that Dr. Holly Wade, who has now left the district, but Jason Owens will take her place, and I will work with them directly. I've been so impressed by what Coast Pride has done in a relatively short time on the coast and in Half Moon Bay. I think that is a great thing. And we just created a gender, a SOGI, sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression policy that the board passed before Pride Month, and a proclamation for Pride Month. But these are things that we should, we can't just make proclamations, we have to make policy change, and we have to make practice change. We know that LGBTQ youth, we know that Latino youth, particularly Latino young men, are disproportionately impacted by racism, by homophobia, by sexism, et cetera, et cetera. I'm sorry I'm going to all these different areas, but The school district also needs to, at some point, change its global studies curriculum in the freshman year to an ethnic studies curriculum, but we're waiting on the state of California to provide us that. We don't need to wait. Since the FAIR Act was enacted in 2011, it is our requirement that we cannot get curriculum that is in any way discriminatory, and that no acts can be discriminatory. And really, ethnic studies should be taught from grade K through grade 12, right? That's something that we will continue to push on. We did professional development with our staff last year on implicit bias training, on looking at disproportionality of discipline and special education identification, particularly for Latino youth, particularly for Latino boys. This is something that I'm excited that is coming up in this conversation as a collective, because it is something that has to be changed culturally, psychologically, in our families, in our communities, and in our schools. It's not enough to say it's going to happen in the school, and if it doesn't work, it's the school's fault. This has to have a cultural change. So that's why I was really impressed by the inclusivity window clings that I know that the Half Moon Bay, City of Half Moon Bay worked on with Coast Pride. The fact that it says, as Jessica started the conversation about all the different groups, where I came from, this was about protected classes. Dr. Green's was the acronym. D for disability, R for religion, G for gender, R for race, N for nationality, and S for sexual orientation. We need to, all of us, make sure that all individuals have the right to, in a school district, become college and career prepared, and all individuals in the community have a fair shake at the American dream, whatever that means to anybody. But we're still quite a ways away from that. And I look forward to, in the fall, bringing in revised equity policy to the board that we will work on in concert with Coast Pride. And I've asked members of ALAS, Ayudando Latinos a Soñar, and Latino Advisory Council if they will join the conversation, because we need this to be an equity platform that is going to include all colors, all religions, all nationalities, all sexual orientations, all people. So there's a lot of work that we're doing this past year and that we plan on doing in the year ahead. In our last board meeting, we approved, bless them, the Cunha English department proposed a culturally relevant book written by a Mexican author, right? We need to be doing this in all our grades, not just in 9th grade for ethnic studies. We need to be doing this K-12. And I really, again, appreciate the work by the city to work with Coast Pride and bring a tangible, visible symbol of this, hopefully in English and in Spanish, so that we can do better by all people.
I guess that's one of the advantages of Cabrillo being a unified school district, is you can develop a platform that carries all the way through, and really think about it holistically for these kids from kindergarten or even preschool all the way through high school. It's really exciting.
Particularly, I think the history of the coast side, I think, is important for us to begin looking at more deeply with social studies, and that will be part of our next curriculum acquisition. We just did a science look at science last year, but in coming years, we need to look at social studies. And I think, Matthew, that's exactly the point. It needs to weave from grade K to grade 12. In my last district, we had literature-based lessons with picture books from grades K to 5, particularly for all the protected classes. There was a picture book in kindergarten on disability, on different ability, on race, on nationality, on gender, on sexual orientation, on religion. It was not easy to do. It was controversial at the time when we did it. And there's always work to improve. I'm not saying that work was perfect either, but the more that we can work with an LGBTQ roundtable, the more we can work with Latino Advisory Council, the more that we can work with groups that we know are underserved, underrepresented, often marginalized, I don't want to say at risk, at promise, who we need to live up to our promise. Yeah, that's going to require us to do more of that work. I think the coast side is particularly well situated as a small district, as a unified district, to weave that all through the grades and say, this is what we expect. That would be part of our curriculum advisory council. But understanding the history of the coastside too, and understanding that it was peopled by indigenous peoples, natives, I think Ohlone there, and that then discovered, in quotes, in air quotes there, by Spanish, and then the Portuguese influence. And then, you know, we should look at all that history and question that history and let our families know about that history, because I think a lot of people don't know. I mean, and there's a fascinating resource out there about, I was looking up Spanish flu in Half Moon Bay when the whole COVID thing came out. There's fascinating history that's already been done on the area. So I think this is a time for us to look more deeply into our history, understand the troubles that we've had with our history and our present, and try to imagine a better future. And the district is committed to trying to do that, particularly for Latino students, particularly right now for the LGBTQ students, families. We need, on an equity lens, to be able to cast a light on those groups now, currently, but certainly for Black youth, for Asian Pacific Islander youth, and I haven't even begun to touch students with disabilities, or for that matter, students of different religious perspectives.
This is Robert. Sean, I'm glad to hear you say all that. I've been very concerned, and I don't think we have enough time to talk today about it. I mean, we could spend a whole separate session on this in terms of specifically figuring out where that synergy is, in terms of, you know, if the Latinx population is 52% and growing, so that's like the future of this community. So how are we preparing, you know, those students for success, given all the obstacles that you've talked about? And being on city council, one of the main sources of information we had is we quite a few times had members of the Youth Leadership Institute come and speak to us. And frankly, I thought it was some of the most authentic, candid source of information. Many of their parents wouldn't come to a council meeting necessarily and speak and feel comfortable, either for language barriers. A lot of folks in the Latinx community live in the shadows. It's not safe for some of them to even feel meetings sometimes. I'm worried about their being too public. So, and then in terms of the economic disparities, they're incredible. So the conversations were real. You know, what do you do when kids, you know, just from basic needs that we might others might take for granted, like having a quiet space to study at home when you're sharing a room with two other siblings, having access to resources that others can take for granted. There was one student I remember, he was talking about feeling depressed and basically opened up this whole issue of access to mental health resources. And he said, yeah, you know, I had this appointment over the hill in Burlingame that they set up, but I couldn't get over there. I was kind of shocked. I said, thinking, spoke to them later, you know, did anybody propose having a remote meeting? Can you do that on your phone? Do you have access to any other resource for a remote therapy session? And I think there are synergies. You know, I'd like to learn more, you know, what kind of, just what's the overall strategy of the school district for you know, for providing resources and helping make students successful. I know of some successful programs that I would actually like to share going on in California that may or may not be widely known about. We gave, you know, as part of our community grant program that was mentioned earlier, I, you know, spoke to Alice, and I knew that they do a lot of mental health services and counseling. And I said, look, we would like to give you an extra $25,000 for, but I was very specific. I said, I want it. She goes, oh, great. We could do it for drug prevention stuff. And I said, well, you know, I really would love to target it specifically for mental health services, especially for younger children. So at the elementary schools and in Cunha, because, school social workers are historically unbelievably, crazily overburdened. Throughout my life, that's been the situation when I've asked about that. So could there be some synergy? So if ALAS is going to provide, let's say, and there's not that much they can do with 25,000, but if they can try a few pilots, where can we get the school social workers maybe, synergized with them to help figure out what could be done, not just for individuals, but maybe for groups to try and, measure and assess where that chronic stresses in families, if anything can be done to help. I mean, obviously, if you don't, the whole thing around social justice issues, right, is putting more money into these other resources. And a lot has been put into mental health, for example. But we know working, with schools and students, that's where, the real impact is. How do you get kids to feel some self-esteem because they're performing better in school and feel like they're getting that support to compete with other students who have a lot of other resources, whether it's having two parents or parents who read to them at night or parents who are bilingual and can read to them in English or, all those things, again, that we can easily take for granted if we haven't had that lack of resources in our lives, our opportunities. And I think there's a lot of people in the community and even financial resources, if we can, propose some of those solutions that I've heard about. And people are actually just hungry saying, yeah, right, show us some programs, and we'll help get money from, various foundations. We know what you'd like to do here. So anyway, I'm happy to help. Just wanted to say that. I'm happy to, just do some one-on-one meetings and brainstorm some ideas with you and see where we, as the city, because, we're a community and our children are important resources and they're a member of this community. And I think sometimes there has been a history of, well, those are school issues, but these are members of our community. We're trying to take, help and take care of everyone and what could be more important than our youth in terms of our future. So that's what I think we're all here for. And in this particular area, I would love to help as much as I can. And I think other members of the council to do that outreach and figure out where we can provide resources.
Robert, I want to thank you for bringing up YLI because YLI reached out to one of our board members, Lizette Cortez, actually, and she reached out to me. We would love to, and I've had some contact with them. ALAS is another great example. We've sat down, we've met with ALAS, Belinda Arriaga, Joaquin Jimenez, different individuals. We want to be able to provide space for ALAS to do the work they do, knowing that that is such a need. When we talk about disproportionate impact or disproportionate outcomes for, I'll just say it, white students versus Latinx students, this is a real thing. At the high school, you are less likely to take an advanced placement class if you're Latinx. That's an outcome. You are disproportionately assigned to special education, or you're disproportionately suspended. We have very few expulsions or expelled. And this isn't just the coast side. This isn't just where we're talking about. This is California writ large. This is America writ large. And what's interesting about it, and it's a point that the board members have brought up to me a lot of times, the coast side is like a microcosm of California because a majority of our students in California are Latino Latinx. And yet I find that the inadequate funding for our students and our families over time, since Prop 13, since the recession, is nothing short of a civil rights issue of our time in California. I find it, growing up in the state in Southern California, I find it not much more hopeful than I found it then. And, teaching in the 90s, I wonder how much progress we have made in this particular regard. I think we need to do more. And I think that is about finding the synergy and finding the partnership. It is about opening up space. And I've talked to Belinda Arriaga about this for all us. I know they enjoy and have space of their own, but we want to provide them space on Cunha campus so that we can have culturally relevant programming, because we know Alas doesn't just do baile folklorico and mariachi, but they also do counseling and they also do tutoring. I've been very impressed with our migrant office and the tutoring they've provided to students whose families are really in need because of their socioeconomic status. I do think it is chilling in California, in the nation, in the coast side currently, to be able to speak up, to be counted, to talk about these issues because of concerns about the political ramifications or just the immigration ramifications, or it's just difficult. And I feel like we need to do more about that. As far as mental health is concerned, we do have, school-based health counselors. We do have psychologists. And when I do have someone reach out to me, sometimes I'm able to just reach out to somebody and say, can that person get some counseling? Can we identify and target that? I do worry that some people aren't coming forward. I think that is a righteous concern and a lived reality for us on the coast and in California. So we need to make our data known. We need to talk about income inequality. We need to talk about disproportionate impact and disproportionate outcomes. And we need to establish as goals to eliminate that disproportionality, to not make this racially predictable. For that matter, to look at our LGBTQ youth and say, it is not acceptable to us that these students are bullied more or have difficulties in school or have their own mental health concerns because they feel somehow that their lives are not authentic or normal, with air quotes again. And this is something we all need to work on together. So again, I'm delighted that Half Moon Bay as a city is working on that, partnering with Coast Pride, partnering with us in certain regards. There is so much more for us to do. And it would be great, just like when we're on the sustainability topic, if we could get more opportunity to make families aware of this, and not just our kids, then we might have a way to sort of look to a more loving, peaceful environment. So, yeah, I'm always optimistic about these things because I think that you've taken great steps already as a community, and any way we can help, we want to help.
Great. I think frankly, I think we've taken baby steps. I'll be honest. I think the great steps lie ahead. But yeah, even, providing those resources, we also, by the way, gave extra grant to Boys and Girls Club because as they were starting to offer some recreational activities for youth, since some of the Cunha programs were cut, it's right there. We wanted to make sure they've already been doing, but they're paid, sir. You have to pay a fee for some of those after-school activities. So they already started offering some scholarships, underserved communities, and we provided another extra $15,000 towards that, assuming if they can get some of those going by putting all the right, protections in place, et cetera. But we could continue to do that, if we see successful programs, but then get the outside agencies involved. And like you said, some of the simple access issues, how many students can take the SAT? One, to even pay the fee. Now, forget about all those programs when you can afford, or parents can afford to get the tutoring programs, private programs, right? But I think it's low-hanging fruit. We can make outreach to some of those tutoring programs and say, hey, would you be willing to offer those tutoring programs remotely at a greatly reduced fee or at cost? And then I can guarantee we can find people who will help fund that. So I'd just love to work with you and help brainstorm some of that low-hanging fruit stuff, where we can get those assets and resources.
So Robert,
to even the playing field. It's all about evening the playing field. Yeah, sorry.
Robert, I totally agree with what you're saying. Is this something that the Coastside Collaborative takes on as a part of their work?
I think right now they are focused mostly, right now for that collaborative on what I would call, being a Californian, lower chakra needs, food, housing, roof over your head.
Maslow, got it.
Yes, Maslow, right, basic haven't gotten to those hierarchical needs, I don't think right now. They're just making sure people have that roof and have enough food and water and clean water in their homes. I'm not saying that could be expanded, but I think there's other resources that we might want to, really target. And we have a lot of students, frankly, who'd be love to volunteer and help kids read in elementary schools. I think there's a lot of synergies in all our systems if we just can help connect some of the dots and put some, energy into it.
If I might jump in on this, the question about the collaborative, I do think, though, it is the right group, because obviously what we're talking about is not just education or employment or other areas. It's really this systemic issue that they talk about is truly the entire system. And we have healthcare, we have mental health providers, we have substance abuse support, we have education, we have basic needs. We have all those different organizations represented, the school district, the city, the county. I think it's the right group to have some of these discussions. So we can work on scheduling at least a discussion about some of this, and maybe that group can help steer where this is best placed to really push forward.
I agree, Matthew, and minimally a great entry point, since they're serving many of those communities, to ask some questions for referrals. Hey, how are the kids doing? How are they doing in school? How's it going right now, especially remotely in schools, working different ways of working. We have some other programs that we're thinking about where we can help. So I think you're right.
Well, I want to thank everyone for coming together and having this this is my first 2x2 forum, but I really appreciate this collaborative nature and sharing of information between the city of Half Moon Bay and our school district. I think this is rich, and hopefully we don't have to wait quite as long for our next one. So.
Hey, before we move to that, the agenda setting, and I think we have to take public comment too. Just a quick question, Sean, going back to an earlier part of your comments about the resource officers and that is provided by the sheriffs, no cost to the school district. So, and you spoke about it in a very, I took as in a positive way. So I'm just wondering if you are getting, or if you feel you're going to get comments from parents or community members that they believe that, that's a negative. They have a perception that that's a negative, having police officers in the school district, and that outweighs the positive. Do you feel that's coming, or is it already coming?
I had a community member reach out to me a couple of weeks ago. I believe they actually may have reached out to City Council also to discuss this, and it was an inquiry mode. It was based on a form letter that I think came out of the action that you saw from Black Lives Matter, basically interrogating the issue for agencies, and starting with cities and then going to school districts. What are you doing? Do you have law enforcement? Do you pay for law enforcement? Could you use that budget differently, et cetera, et cetera? Look, my own experience is probably skewed in a particular way because I worked at San Quentin State Prison for 5 years. And so I know two different parts about that. I know the disproportionate amount of Black and Latino men in the prison system, which is a problem. I also know that there were law enforcement. I depended on them for my own particular safety. In a school venue, when I was superintendent previously, I had a very close a relationship with the city police department because we depended upon them for our safety. That said, we never had any situations of abuse that I knew of, that were reported, that came to light. We know that is not the case in some school systems. We know that is not the case in some school systems. My own experience in the past year, again, has been a great admiration and respect for the sheriffs that work with us. They provided us great support, particularly in concerns where it was about school safety, about individual safety, about concerns that I think the public would want law enforcement around for. They also are not on our contract. We don't pay for them. They don't have dedicated offices, and they serve as a resource. And we've had Sean and Vake, who have been great. And Saul and Matt. I mean, these have been great individuals for us. So overall, I think, I told the community member, we don't pay. It hasn't been a problem. And let me tell you about all the things we've been trying to do this year to try to use an equity lens for all these other things. And they just really wanted to sort of hear, you're not paying and you haven't had a problem. I think that's fair. This is a budget constraint time. A budget is a board or a council's moral document, right? So that is what you want to invest in. It's a moral statement. I think it is fair to say if you're using resources for something, could they be better used for an ounce of prevention instead of a pound for cure? I think that is totally reasonable, but in our situation, we don't pay for it. We've relied on them as close partners. We appreciate all they do for youth and families and for the community. And I've only had one individual contact me.
Great. No, that's helpful. Thank you.
Okay, so I think we're ready to jump. Do we have any public comment, Jonathan?
I don't see any hands raised. Are there any public forum requests? I don't think so.
Okay. So I think the final item on our agenda then is to just look at our next meeting, generally when we'll hold it, and some other topics we might want to cover. I think we've already heard about some topics we definitely want to talk about at the next meeting already. And this is an opportunity just to identify any additional topics.
Are we still on a 6 month
date?
Are we still shooting for 6 months from now?
I guess that's a question. It seems to me every 6 months is the right cadence, but now, unfortunately, we're kind of on a bad rhythm, in my opinion. I think July 1st and January 1st is generally not a great time to schedule meetings. So it seems like we should either try to go a little sooner or shoot for like March 1st or something like that to get back on a better schedule. I don't know what works better for the school district, but it seems like July 1st, January 1st is not the best 6 month cadence.
I agree, because I think there's an aspect of it being good in the summer because we're reflective in the summer in a school sort of world. But I would suggest that if March 1st is better, then we should try, why don't we just try to make good on that by having another meeting 6 months before March 1st. I will note that coming up in October will be Hispanic Heritage Month. Latino, Latinx, however you want to put it. Most people call it Hispanic Heritage Month. And of course, you'll have LGBTQ History Month again. So if these are two issues that I think that we want to continue to look at from an equity lens, we could try to have a meeting in October to discuss that and the steps we're taking on that.
Okay, so it sounds like early October would be what we're shooting for. We'll coordinate with Sean and his staff on the exact timing and get that set. And that'll get us back to a kind of a fall and spring cadence. And I know we've heard, it sounds like equity and social justice is a topic we want to continue talking about. It's an area where the school district and the city can really work together to affect change. Sustainability was another topic that seemed to be really key for everybody. Are there any other topics right now that are on people's minds? Obviously, we'll reach out before we schedule that meeting. And
well, Matthew, we'll also keep traffic transportation on the agenda. That seems like a good standing item, and we will do the additional research on the line bike idea. But that seems like an item that should probably routinely stay on the agenda as well.
I would just say I hope that we will be able to sit down with high school and intermediate school actors, stakeholders too, to talk about that joint use agreement. I mean, hopefully we can get that up and running to show to council and board this fall so that when we have campuses more open to the public, we could make that dream real too.
I would like to offer, perhaps not for October, maybe early in 2021, affordable housing. I think that that's going to continue to be an issue for our teachers, and that would be a good conversation to have for the longer term.
I think that's great. Can we more specifically call it affordable teacher housing?
Absolutely.
Because
whether it's just teachers, for us, obviously, we're going to be focused on teachers, but in our community, many service providers that are at an income level that they need housing.
Right. And I like calling, the reason I like calling it teacher housing, and just being a politician now, that is truly one of the most politically, polls extremely well. When we talk about affordable housing and the places people's minds go, when we say teacher housing, everyone in the community very uniformly supports that. And it's a good positive entry point that so many people are impacted by hoping we could keep good teachers here, et cetera. So that's the only reason I call that. And another topic, I'm not quite sure how to phrase it, but in terms of what we were talking about earlier together, this idea of leveling the academic playing field is a topic I'd like to, put on the agenda, especially this holistic approach. You got to make sure kids aren't hungry when you want to sit them down to study. You want to make sure some of that stress, how do you affect all the parts of a kid's life, a student's life holistically, to make sure that field is being leveled a little more so they have access, not only do they have access to some other resources, but that they're in a mental and physical state to take advantage of those resources and utilize them. And so again, we could always be exploring those synergy points with each other where we could, come together and help out. So, but at the end of the day, it's how you can have an even playing field for folks in school. Because
Robert, one, I know it's getting late, but one area that Dr. Bhatia is leading this next year is visual and performing arts. And with a full suite of cognitive experiences, you come much closer to leveling that playing field, because not everyone in our community has access to all of those other rich experiences. And so the more that we can provide that as a priority within the school system, I think that helps us too.
I'd love to hear more about that. Great. Thank you.
Hey, Matthew, if you shoot for late September versus early October, it would allow an opportunity to partner on some of those October celebrations, but also to collaborate as we head into PSPS season in October again.
All right, sounds good.
Just for my staff colleagues, I'd say if you want to reach out to us in September, we will have our proclamations ready, and we will have our equity policy revisions hopefully ready also. So we could share that with you, and if we could cross-pollinate, that might be good for the whole order. And then just on the affordable housing thing, I just like to call it affordable school employee housing, because actually our food service workers and our bus drivers and so many of our classified staff are paid even less, some of them not much more than minimum wage. And then I would definitely, Robert, look forward to any conversation we can have about maximizing resources to help students so that everyone's college and career prepared.
Right. And hey, if you have an acre of land somewhere, I'll personally go to Mid-Penn and sit in their office all day. So they
the district does. The district does. The district does.
Okay.
So we should talk.
2 thumbs up.
Yeah, we got to get that as part of the conversation, because affordable housing has been one of our top priorities, but it's been probably not the affordable housing level that you guys are talking about here, which is why I do like the distinction of labeling it, as Sean said. I think our affordable housing that we've been looking for has been a lower income level as our priority so far. But so it's good. I think that conversation will be good.
Awesome.
Okay, great. I think we've got a good list of topics, and we'll be looking for end of September. And of course, we'll reach out to all of you before then if there's any additional topics we want to cover. And, you know, judging how the last 5 months has gone, 5 months could change a lot. So we'll make sure that gets coordinated, and we're looking forward to that. Any final comments, parting words before we sign off?
Thank you so much for all you do and for thinking about this as a team effort, a collective effort. I really want to thank Karen and Matthew, and particularly for helping set up this meeting.
Well, and thank you to you and Rosie, Sean. Always a pleasure to work with you and partner with you.
This has been great for me. This is a very dedicated and I think really creative and highly talented group. So I'm delighted to join you for the first time. Thank you.
Rock and roll.
Adam, you got cut off.
No, I was just trying to move it along. I said, thank you all. Appreciate it. And here we go. Rock and roll. We got some other topics to discuss. It's good.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Bye. Thanks.